Hey, good evening all. Was hoping we'd pick up a little bit of that sea breeze activity out there, but no dice. And the cirrus clouds that you see out there, those are remnants of thunderstorms in Louisiana, southeast Texas, that have worked their way this way. And that stuff we can see on the soundings, and we'll be taking a look at that shortly. But the view outside at this moment, not too much different. You can see the sun starting to go down a little bit. Anyway, welcome to Meteorology Lab, and let's see, we got Andrew saying good evening there in Peoria, 78-degree dew point. And definitely in July, Illinois, some of the highest dew points on record. And I don't know if any of those records have actually been confirmed as far as statistically valid data, but dew points around 80 to 81 do occasionally occur. And looking at the map right here, I can see an 82. I'm going to show you that shortly. Let's see, Justin Pulliam is here. Sue M, 72-degree dew point in south central Indiana. Thunderstorm almost there, top 60,000. Ron Chalfant out in Southern California. And friends in Strader, Illinois, I think. EAS fan is here, and Eddie W., Burl H., Lloyd McCarter in North Little Rock. David McCarter says, good evening, everyone. 70-degree dew points in the Metroplex. We have Ryan here with rain. Hot in Bell County, Texas, around Temple, near Alexi's place. Brett Dean reporting a heat wave in southern New Jersey, 98 degrees, 110 heat index. Michael Burrell also joining us, Justin Pulliam, and Ryan Toomeys says 16 inches of nonstop rain. And the viewer count is a little bit light tonight because I failed to get the video listed until about 7. And I really should get a jump on that and get that done earlier. So I'm going to try to do that after we do the webcast later. So let's go to the charts. And here is where you can see the high dew points in the Midwest. And there's that 82-degree reading here. I don't know what city that is. I know Kankakee is around here. So just a little bit west of there, 82, and then 78, 77 around Bloomington and Peoria. Some very impressive dew points, and that's right ahead of that cold front that has gradually been sinking southward through Iowa and Nebraska and into northern Kansas near I-70. And out there in Kansas, we can see 100-degree readings, 100 to 102 around Concordia. And let's see where the moisture axis is. Well, if I plot the 70-degree isodrosotherm, it's going to come up with something like this. Back into Iowa, and yeah, that 70-degree isodrosotherm covers a very large area. So think something like that right there. And you can see the effect of mixing on the higher terrain with dry air aloft, resulting in the depressed dew points in the high plains where we only have 40s and 50s. And then out in the central U.S. and the Midwest, 75s, where would that be? Just doing a kind of a rough guess. It's kind of looking like this right here. And you can see that the thunderstorms correspond pretty well to where this moisture axis is. Higher theta E air, pretty much right in this region right here. Let me verify that and plot that. I'm going to go to moisture, theta E, and there we go. So a little bit of a noisy field, but ridge, theta E ridge, right through here. So that's the best area for thunderstorm development. Theta E is also very high down in this area, but no thunderstorm activity, and that is a good indicator of capping in this area. So that would explain why there's probably not much backbuilding in this region here. Okay, elsewhere around the country, let's take a look and go out west. We haven't looked at California very much. Phoenix looking a little bit cooler there with 107, only 98 at Tucson, but out in the deserts, Palm Springs, thermal 110 degrees, and 101 there at Bakersfield, so very, very warm if you go inland. Pacific Northwest also looking hot again. That's a good indicator that the ridge is in place. We have 91 at Omak and 92, I guess, maybe around Ephrata. It's basically a lot of 90s in here. Then we head out to the northern plains. This is where the cool air is. You can see that coming south from Manitoba and Ontario. And there's areas here where temperatures are only in the 60s. So right around where Fred is there, even 50s coming up into International Falls. Northeast tonight, they're in this persistent pattern of northerly flow, very mild conditions in that area. And that's due to the influence of the Hudson Bay vortex. It's been kind of strong this summer, and it's been kicking this cool air southward, and you can see the very cool temperatures here in the North Bay area, 52 there. And then as far as hot weather, just go a little bit further south, and then we do pick that up in New Jersey, 89 right there, 86 at Wilmington, and then we get 92 at Washington, D.C. And then just to complete things, we go to Florida, and we see easterly flow predominating. So that's the Bermuda High, the influence of that Bermuda High kind of nosed in. If we look at the isobars, and I'll plot that up. And there we go. So we have a 10-20 line kind of coming in like that, maybe extending into the Gulf, and that puts South Florida under this easterly flow there. And into the charts we go. And we'll get to the model data in just a bit, but I don't know, why not? We can take a look at the first frame of precipitable water. I decided to pull up a continental chart here. Let me advance this to the current time. And there we go. This shows the distribution of moisture. And we can see that the drier air associated with the cold air mass over the Hudson Bay area kind of centered right there. So that's in close proximity to the northeast there. Also a little bit of dry air inland, and it's helping to bring the temperatures up in the northwest interior. Some moisture has apparently worked all the way up into the Northwest Territories. So we're seeing some 1-inch precipitable water amounts. That's pretty high there. And the better moisture, that looks like it's around South Florida right there, all the way back to Puerto Rico and out into Louisiana right here. So kind of a band through here. Gulf of Mexico, not too much moisture actually, so about 1.5-inch precipitable waters. And then off to the south, you can see a little hurricane there. That's, well, we can see Eugene right there, the remnants of that, and then this is a new system. This looks very normal for this time of year. This is what we saw every single day on the webcast back last July, just southerly flow, the influence of the Bermuda High extending inland, and that gives us a pretty quiet weather pattern. And the southeast right there in Florida, you can see the very extensive thunderstorm cluster there, from all the way from the Florida Keys up to Titusville and north of Orlando. Just a slight risk there for Illinois and southern Wisconsin. A few storms there in Iowa, and we can take a look at them on GR level 2. Looks a little bit quieter than what we had yesterday. Back then we were looking at a tornado warning just south of the Grand Forks area, and that shifted southward, and now we've got this one severe thunderstorm warning north of the Quad Cities, and then in northern Missouri, just kind of a very loose cluster of storms in this area. And the movement on that, just kind of a slow southeastward drift. Do got one warning out for the tail end here around Bethany. Okay, well, let's take a look at the tropics with the polar orbiter data. And here we're looking at the Aqua satellite. And I meant to start looking at the dust a little bit, and I'm going to bring up the aerosol optical depth for that. That's always kind of interesting to look at. So did that come up? I don't think so. Yeah, aerosol optical depth. Okay, yeah, here it comes. So, kind of buried in between these swaths and between the cloud bands, we can see a little area of dust coming out of West Africa, and that'll be gradually heading eastward or westward towards North America. And one small area looks like of dust north of Honduras. So if we can tap any deep tropical flow, we'll probably see that move up into Texas. But I really have no idea what the trajectories are. I don't think they're from the Gulf, actually. And in between here, you can see the smoke there in Alberta, kind of in this clear area. We saw that pretty good yesterday on the imagery back then. Maybe I can back this up one day. Yeah, we had more clear air, and you can see right in there some of that smoke, and let me take away that layer, and there it is. That's some definite obscuration of visibility there in these interior valleys. And I'm not too clear on exactly where the smoke came from. I thought it may have been from like northern Alaska, Yukon, when they had all that hot weather. But it looks like there's a couple of spots of smoke in here, so maybe British Columbia is having problems too. Very dense smoke right in there. So I guess maybe they do have some fires going on in the interior of British Columbia right there. As far as Texas, we've got a pretty active sea breeze pattern. You can see the sea breeze earlier today spreading northward. And I was looking at that on the College of DuPage site earlier. Let me see if I can bring that up. Weather analysis tools and satellite, 1 kilometer, visible. And I'll pull up the Central Texas sector here. So yeah, earlier today, this is about 1:30 p.m. and rolling that forward. You can see those storms spreading northward. And right around 7:30 here, this is mostly just anvil debris. Very little precip actually reaching the ground at this point. And pretty much what you saw was where we are looking southeastward at just a bunch of anvil debris. The only actual deep convection we have going on, that's in the San Antonio area right there. Okay, the tropics. Let's see. The tropics are pretty quiet. Five-day outlook. No new tropical cyclones expected in the next 5 days. Pretty hostile environment, and Ryan sent me a link to this. This is one of the goes.noaa.gov sectors, one of the hurricane loops, and this was showing the sheared environment, helping to create a very hostile environment for the waves moving westward from the African coast. So you see that very strong movement there of cirrus coming up from the South American coast. So I guess we have to wait a few more weeks here for things to get favorable for tropical storm activity. 250 millibar flow showing maybe our long wave ridge is kind of flattened out a little bit, maybe dissipating. We've got, in fact, this whole thing may be kind of a long wave pattern with long wave trough pattern, maybe a ridge embedded. In any case, the jet stream pattern showing jet confined mostly to the northern plains and to Ontario and Quebec like that. You can see very weak flow here in the central U.S. We've only got about 15 to 20 knots over Oklahoma and Texas, and we do see a little bit of a cyclonic circulation in Texas. So that indicates a low right around San Antonio, Austin. That's probably helping to generate some of that thunderstorm activity in that area. But if you go north into Kansas, they've got an anticyclone. So we have clockwise flow up in that area. So the center of that high looks to be right around Concordia and Russell and Hayes. So I was telling you yesterday, if you find ridging aloft, especially high pressure, that's going to be a major detriment to thunderstorm development. And that kind of makes sense because we saw that thunderstorm line extending all the way to Bethany, but not quite all the way back along the front into northern Kansas. So probably some capping at play, and we might be able to see that on the soundings. Okay, let me pull up the sounding. We'll look at Topeka for this morning. And what we see here, we do have some steep lapse rates. So that by itself is favorable for thunderstorm activity. But what I see here is a indication of a subsidence inversion right there. Kind of an inverted V profile right there. So looks like maybe we're kind of capped, not at 700 millibars, but a little bit lower, around 800 to 900 millibars. Dry air just off the surface, that's a big problem with that subsidence. And if you try to mix a layer, you're going to be looking at probably mixing this mixing ratio line right there, maybe here. So you're basically bringing dry air down to the surface, dew points go down to the 60s, and we end up with what you see on the map here in Kansas. All these 50s and even mid-60s. Mid-60s kind of weak in a pattern like this. We really want to see things up near 70 or higher. Let me see if we have a current sounding for Topeka. 13th at 0Z. We're really flying through July. Okay, Topeka, current data coming up, and there you can see that the dry air is mixed with the lower layer. So we've got a mixed parcel kind of right in here. So we're talking about like maybe 67 degree dew points at the surface, and we try to combine that with maybe 96, 95 degree air. That's our lifted parcel. So not only do we have very weak cape, but we also have some capping. So maybe there is a little bit of warm air in the mid-levels right here, just enough to cause problems. Even if that cap was not there, all we would see was probably just weak showers developing. And a lot of this warm air, this is associated with that upper level high. And we can definitely see it up there. We see westerlies there, and then this layer here, a very weak flow. And that's probably associated there with that high. And then for Fort Worth, let me pick up that sounding. And I think what I'll do, since it's kind of quiet, we'll take a look at a couple soundings around North America. Now that we have a pretty good handle on things, actually we don't. We should take a look at the frontal analysis. And here it comes. All right, so thickness gradient up along the northern border. Okay, so that pretty much tells us cold front from Wisconsin, maybe through southern Minnesota, back to South Dakota, and then a warm front eastward through Michigan and into lower Ontario, like that. So south of that, what we've got is southerly flow, except maybe in Iowa, maybe there's some outflow boundaries through here. That's going to be subsynoptic boundaries. We've got a pretty strong thermal low in the southwest U.S. And then out in the northwest U.S., well, we've got cold air lurking right off the coast here, but very warm air inland. So as far as a frontal position, I don't know. There's probably something maybe hung up in the mountains around the Cascades, maybe through here. And then possibly a warm front, something like that. Maybe connecting back to this other front. So this is kind of like my preliminary look at where the fronts are. And we're going to keep this in mind because I'm going to pull up a couple of soundings, maybe one for Phoenix, in the Phoenix area, Tucson, maybe another for maybe Oregon. We'll do one back behind the cold front, one for the northeast where they've had this persistent northeast flow, and then maybe another one down in the southeast. And then just for something interesting, we'll probably take a look at the polar regions. Fronts up in that area, well, you can see we've broken up that low pressure area in the Hudson Bay region. Kind of replaced that with this big high. And on the west side of that high, we've got warm air advection, so maybe we got a front something like that right there. But up north, the center of the cold air mass, that's over northern Baffin Island up to Devon Island right there. So maybe that's a good place to start. We'll take a look at Resolute Bay way up north. Sounding data already in an hour ago. The internet age is amazing. We can get all this weather data from like thousands of miles away, way up in the Arctic. And you can see a very unusual skew-T. This is very typical of the Arctic regions. We have a very low tropopause. This is all the stratosphere all up here. So the stratosphere based at about 25,000 feet. So if you were flying in a jet, you'd probably be up at 37,000 feet up in this level. You'd be up in the stratosphere. And the bleed air feeding into the engines that goes into the cabin, you would detect increased levels of ozone if you had a detector with you. So that's so reliable that they use that as a tracer gas near tropospheric folds to determine if that fold is reached down to the surface. Pattern, though, looks very stable. You can see very deep northwesterly flow, so probably cold air advection off the ice pack. and a little bit of a dry adiabatic profile in the lowest couple thousand feet. And when I see that, that usually indicates air mass modification. So they've probably had some warm weather possibly, and maybe some very cold air trying to replace that. Okay, for the Pacific Northwest, let's go to Salem, Oregon. They're going to be somewhere between the warm air inland and the cold air to the west. And we see a very dry profile. This is the moist side. This is the moist trace right there. So we see dew points around 50, dropping off to 40 off the surface. So that's going to be associated with fair weather. Looks like a very stable pattern here. A little bit of instability near the surface, but overall looks like good weather. We'll look at Tucson. There you see the classic inverted V and a little bit of moisture aloft. So depending on what the profiles look like above that, we can get elevated storms from these areas of very high humidity. So what we do is we lift these layers aloft and come up with something like that, and it looks like a little bit of skinny cape in there, a little bit of capping. There's probably a few showers there, especially over the mountains, and when you get the downburst from that, the downburst you basically trace down. That kind of gives you like the wet bulb temperature. So when that reaches the level of Tucson, the downburst air is right around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and that contrasts very sharply with the 100-degree temperatures around it. So that means very strong, gusty winds. Wind always a problem when you're involving dry air, like you see on that sounding. For Florida, we'll go to Miami, and there we expect to find kind of a tropical-looking sounding. Don't have the current observation, but we'll go back to this morning. There's Miami, take 2. And this shows a little bit of dry air aloft, but overall, kind of a conditionally unstable profile. Lots of moisture in the lower 5 to 10,000 feet. And there you can see very deep easterly flow, which is typical south of the subtropical high and south of the Bermuda High Ridge. And then for the northeast, we'll take a look at Brookhaven. I think that's on Long Island, maybe northeast of JFK, I think. So there it is, and this is showing very deep westerly flow. So if you think about the relationship of the winds to the pressure field, this tells you that you would find low pressure to your north or northeast, and you would find high pressure to the south or southwest. So this westerly flow indicates we're probably on the north side of that Bermuda High Ridge. Temperature's kind of cool there with lower 70s. This is this morning's plot here. They've probably warmed up during the day to about maybe about 80 there. And some pretty decent moisture in the lower levels. If we mix this, we get dew points in the low to mid 60s, so there's a little bit of moisture there. And I would probably expect to find a few showers here and there with that moisture. Yeah, there's a little bit of cape there, so I might expect to find a few showers somewhere, maybe back in Pennsylvania or upstate New York or something like that. Because we've got that steep lapse right there and a fair bit of moisture. Okay, so we covered a lot of ground, and one thing I didn't show you is the satellite. There's the storms there in the Missouri and Iowa region. just ahead of that cold front up in Minnesota. So these are probably topping out there at about 50 to 60,000 feet. And it does look like we've gotten a few thunderstorms to fire in the higher terrain at around Colby, Kansas. But right around Topeka and Concordia, that's underneath that upper level high, keeping things pretty well shut down. And pretty much this whole area underneath subsidence. And then there's a look at Texas right there. I think we saw that on the College DuPage imagery. Not much going on. Not a whole lot of moisture in the Gulf, really, but lots of thunderstorm activity in Mexico there. And I remember seeing on the model data, they were shunting a lot of moisture eastward a few days ago, so I think that's kind of what's happened there. There's been a lot of moisture advection into the higher terrain there of northern Mexico. Okay, so we're about ready to head into the forecast here, about half an hour in. A whole lot of chat here, so I'm going to have to kind of skip through this a little bit. Saw something mentioned here about Saudi Arabia. Yeah, Brett Dean says the highest ever recorded dew point was 95 in Saudi Arabia with a heat index of 148. That area around Basra, which is it's in southwest Iran, kind of where Iraq joins the Persian Gulf. That delta region definitely does get some very intense heating, very high dew points. Kuwait also. And yeah, I've seen some readings on the charts there of temperatures in the 110s with dew points in the 80s. So very brutal there. And I don't know how people survived that back in the centuries past. Hiker Arizona says dew points have been in the 60s around Tucson the last few days, can barely handle that. Big storms on top of Fort Lauderdale from Ryan there. 4 inches in Miami and 3 inches in Fort Lauderdale so far. Lightning intense at the moment, shutting the airports down. Little discussion there in chat about Mount St. Helens and the British Airways 747 that lost 3 engines. Yeah, that was over Indonesia back in '82. I would recommend looking that up. I think it's on Wikipedia, but yeah, there was a flight crew on a 747 unknowingly flew through the top of a volcanic plume at night and ingested all that volcanic ash, and they made an emergency landing. I don't know if they got the engines restarted or what, but they were able to land successfully at Jakarta, and that almost turned into a very bad disaster there. But, that helped accelerate some of the volcanic monitoring programs, and things have changed since then, and now we've got kind of like a 24-hour watch on volcanic eruptions and how that impacts the air routes. A couple people mentioned buffering. I should let you all know that I made one change in the stream since yesterday. And I don't know if this has had an effect on you guys. Yeah, this is looking at my broadcaster software in settings. I made a change in the stream. These are the settings that I'm working with right now. I don't know if you can see that there. But I use this CPU usage preset. I set that. I used to have this at super. I think I had it very fast. I changed this to medium. And the thinking was I would compress the data a little bit better so I could pipe better quality down to you guys. But that's the only change I made, and I wouldn't think that would cause any problems. Maybe for mobile devices that could be an issue because they have to decompress that data. So if you're on mobile and seeing problems, definitely let me know. I would imagine desktop users are probably just fine. But we'll see what happens. But no change to the bitrate or anything like that. Couple people stuck on the sounding page. And looking at my stream health here, it doesn't look like anybody's really disconnecting. Looks like the stream viewership gradually going up over the past 10-20 minutes, and to me that's a good indicator. That graph there, let me show you this. Yeah, this right there, you see the upward slope on the viewers. To me, that's a good sign we're not really having any technical problems. People seem to be getting the stream just fine. Usually when that goes down, that's an indicator that people are having trouble, and then they go off to other videos. So this map might have been what happened right here. That was right around, let's see, whatever was going on at 8:31. That was when I started on the forecast, when I pulled up this chart here. So that if that's what happened, this little segment in here, that might have been what that was. Okay, so let me just kind of press on, and we'll look at the forecast here. So over the next 24 hours, MCS developing in Colorado, and that's going to move eastward. We do have a little bit of good moisture working northward from Oklahoma, but not enough to keep these storms going. They dissipate overnight. And then the storms in Iowa, those storms, those are going to move eastward into Illinois, MCS, and looks like towards the end, those dissipate also. One line moves through northern Missouri overnight. That one holds together, but it succumbs to problems by dawn. Okay, so looks like most of our problem areas are just going to be north of I-70, kind of in this area here, but otherwise kind of a quiet night. Now we'll go ahead and look at precipitable water over the next week or so. We'll just check this out. And I'm going to run through this quickly so you can really see the changes. Okay, so we're running forward to Friday, then to Saturday, and you can see this push of dry air coming from the northern plains there. So cold air coming southward into the Midwest, bit of a break there, but we've also got moisture streaming northwestward onto the Texas coast. And you can see 2-inch precipitable amounts from East Texas down to southern Alabama. And then we see a couple of migratory systems moving through Ontario. Jet stream pattern moving west to east through there. And in Atlanta, Nashville, Kentucky, Arkansas, some of that dry air has moved southward around Monday or Tuesday. So after the weekend, some of that dry air will be filtering southward, and that also means a boundary along the leading edge of that. So that boundary could cause some precip wherever that ends up in Alabama or Mississippi. And then going through the week, Tuesday the 18th, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm having a bit of lag here. Okay, there it goes. It's lagging a bit on my end as I hit the keys, but that's just on my end here. But it looks like another incursion towards the 27th. So, looks like a pretty persistent pattern. Just a little bit of ridging into the central plains, and otherwise just continued outbreaks of cool air moving from central Canada into the eastern U.S. And towards the end here, you can see this GFS. Don't you hate that you're doing a streaming video on the phone rings? Give me just a second. That may be my cousin. Yep. Yeah, I was right. Sorry, that was just a family member. I'm going to call him back after the video. So anyway, let's head on. You could hear that phone ringing back there. I've got an old-fashioned phone I bought off Amazon. It's one of those old Bell system touch-tone phones, desk phones, you know, with the 12 keys. I bought one of those old-fashioned phones because we get power outages here from time to time. I don't want to be on a battery-powered handset when that goes on, so I got an old-fashioned phone, so if we ever have a power outage, we'll be safe. And that's one thing to think about. If you're getting into storm season or even hurricane season, you might want to get one of those old-fashioned phones so you'll be good to go. Okay, I was looking for this tropical storm. Remember the models a couple of days ago? They were trying to bring a hurricane into the Carolinas. They've backed off on that, and as Ryan said, we've kind of lost a lot of the favorable patterns there. Well, we never had any favorable patterns in the Atlantic to begin with all that shear, but the GFS has not really picked up very well on that for whatever reason, and it decided to forge ahead and do that hurricane. And let's see, I'm looking for any indication of a hurricane in the Caribbean or the Atlantic. And I think it's pretty much backed away from that scenario. I mean, I see one storm right here in the northeast around the 27th. And I can't really tell what the origin of that is. Looks like it just kind of, I guess it's kind of a baroclinic low right there over the Carolinas around the 25th and just kind of develops. All right, so we'll go ahead and take a look at the dew point, and this will kind of finalize our look at the weather. So we have a very characteristic pattern for this time of year for July, just southerly flow, and you can see the Bermuda high just kind of nosing in like that. Baroclinic systems up to the north. There's the cold front and warm front. And we can see the front sinking southward over the next 24 hours. And then by the time we do the video tomorrow, Thursday evening, front will run from about Chicago down to St. Louis and out to Dodge City. It looks like some very strong upslope flow along the Interstate 70 corridor, so maybe a few storms from Hayes, Russell, maybe to Concordia, Salina. Then going into Friday, looks like maybe a stalled boundary through that same area right there. I would expect maybe some overnight MCSs through Kansas. Looks like some very high dew points, 80s there in Shreveport. Sometimes that means very high dew points, sometimes that means convection. And it does have kind of a little bit of a popcorn look there, so maybe some storms going. In fact, I can just flip right over and take a look at that. Let me go over to the precipitation chart. There's Thursday, then we go into Friday evening. Yeah, so here, yeah, a lot of storms there over Shreveport. And typically those, when they fire, they do tend to move a little bit westward. So probably a few storms also moving into East Texas there on Friday. And we might as well just go ahead and continue with this chart. We'll go into the weekend for Saturday. More thunderstorms there for northern Louisiana. Very weak pattern for Texas. We see high pressure moving southeast through the Midwest, and that'll bring a little bit of cool air. And you'll notice that this high sinks southeastward on Sunday. And just kind of loses definition. I guess maybe it's over here. Let's see, where does that go? Hang on. Yeah, we see it right here. And moving forward. Yeah, it looks like at this point it's right there. This is on Sunday night. So what's left of the high right there in the southern U.S. And we see things getting pretty active in Canada. New cold front moving through the northern Rockies there. So maybe some precip through there, maybe breaking up the drought there in North Dakota. For Monday and Tuesday, cold front mostly moves to the east. You can see the tail end right there in the South Dakota area. Pretty quiet in Texas, high pressure out in the Gulf, kind of linked up with that Bermuda high. Also, high pressure in Indiana, and this is more from the Canadian high. And then let's see, going into Wednesday and Thursday, 19th and 20th. A couple of MCSs north of this frontal system in Iowa. So continued above average precip there. And looks like a couple boundaries sinking southward. Boundary located here on Saturday the 22nd, so this is about 9 or 10 days away. And really no big surprises on the charts over the next 14 days. Just systems moving mostly through the central and northern plains in this area right here. Above average chances for rain through that band. And looks kind of dry most of the period, but there will be a little precip from time to time, like Friday night in the Louisiana area right there. And one very cool product we can look at to kind of find all the precip is the 24-hour precipitation amount. So let me pull that up. So we're looking at 24-hour accumulated precip. So you can see most of the precip is from Colorado to Chicago. Very dry in Texas. Then going forward into the weekend, you can see the effect of the upper level high across Texas. The northern plains right there keeping things kind of shut down. Lots of precip in the southern U.S. And looks like some of that works westward into Texas around Sunday and Monday. And that's probably the leading edge of that front sinking southward. So basically just sinking southward gradually over the span of a couple of days. And looks like that reaches Texas around the beginning of next week. Then midweek, pretty quiet except for the northern plains, maybe the MCS from Minnesota down to the Great Lakes. And then you can see a gradual shift southward of all that precip into Maryland, Ohio, and West Virginia. Very dry for Texas. I guess the upper level high has taken hold. And then towards the end of the sequence, remember things are getting very active up in this area here. Generate a few MCSs there in the Dakotas. Precip really picking up there in Arizona. It's getting about to be that season. And then very dry for Texas. Yep, pretty much getting into summer where we're at here. All right. So let's see here. I'm going to copy this chat so I can take a look and find out about that buffering. I see that the views are going back up. That's kind of my graph right there. So I think this is where we had the problem from about 8:30 to, what is that, 8:36? And then we kind of picked up. So I think right here, the stream is looking pretty good. Okay, let's see. Yeah, a little discussion there about the phones. Brett Dean says, I feel old. I still use my landline. Yeah, I've got a landline. The problem is if you try to disable your landline service and get what they call dry DSL, supposedly you get like a lot less bandwidth. It's like you really need that phone service for some reason. You need that carrier there to really pipe the data through. And that's just one of those things I read there on DSL reports. So I don't really use my landline too much, but I'm keeping it up because I do need that higher bandwidth for this streaming. All right. Yeah, a little bit of buffering there. Lexi says only 8 likes. Come on, we can do more than that. I'm happy with 8 likes. I appreciate that. I'll take whatever I can get here. You guys are going to see a little bit more activity in this channel because I've not really done any promotion like advertising of this channel in the past several months. Last year, I poured about $20 or $30 into Google AdWords and promoted some of the videos, and that caused the numbers to go up a little bit here, quite a bit. So I'm going to do that again, especially after I do the radar scope thing. And we should see the viewer count start to go up here. And other than that, I guess I don't have too much else. So I guess it's probably time to roll the music. And hope you all have a good evening. Y'all take care, and we will see you tomorrow.